At the end of 2022, reports in the Scottish Sun newspaper announced that police had destroyed DNA evidence in the case of Jodi Jones. Further reports declared that at least 10 samples of bodily fluids had not been forensically tested. Sandra Lean, who was at the time the spokesperson for the Luke Mitchell campaign, a campaign born of the belief that he was wrongfully convicted of Jodi's murder, would go on to explain that the untested samples were semen, and that they were listed in a hidden file withheld from the defence. The result of this new information, that police had not only destroyed evidence, but had concealed samples, caused outrage among supporters and people who had concerns regarding his conviction. Protests ensued, with placards and banners displaying slogans such as "Release the samples" and "Prove it." Social media surges were organised by the online groups who proclaimed their dedication to fighting for justice, not only for Luke Mitchell, but for Jodi Jones, the 14-year-old murder victim. In 2023, a series of videos were made by Sandra Lean, updating supporters on the status of the samples, their whereabouts, the importance of testing them, and how funding would be needed.
So, next up are a number of comments about the testing of the samples. For obvious reasons, I can't say which samples we're pursuing and why, but I do want to address some of the things that have been said. So the first is the claim that legal aid will pay for testing. Yeah, it might, maybe even probably will. But why would we trust them? If we go the legal aid route, they will have control over the labs we use. They will have control over the type of testing, all on the basis of cost. Or you can't do that type of testing, it's too expensive. Or you can't use that lab, it's too expensive. Okay, now why would we trust that? Given how dirty we've seen they're prepared to play, why would we do that? We want entirely independent, transparent testing. And the only way we're going to get that is if we raise the money to pay for it independently. And that's why some people have been talking recently about the potential need for fundraising once we get the stuff with samples sorted out. So yeah, we've got no confidence left in the system. So that's why we're not minded to go the legal aid route. It's not that we wouldn't get funding for it. We wouldn't get enough funding, and we wouldn't have the freedom to do the testing the way we want to do it. Okay. So when the time comes, when we're ready for that, those who agree with this approach and who would like to help, the means and the ways in which it can help will be published as soon as we know, as soon as we've narrowed down the samples and the testing, all of that. We will let you know. It's entirely up to individuals if they want to help or not. Nobody's pressuring anybody. But for those who don't agree with this route, all I have to say is it's not their lives. It's not their futures, and it's not their freedoms that are hinging on these tests. So I'm afraid, as far as that one's concerned, that's kind of the end of the matter, as far as I'm concerned. So when the time comes, we will publish the details on the two main Facebook groups. So the Jodi Jones and Luke Mitchell Who've Got Justice and Stand Together with Luke Mitchell. We'll put the details on there. The links are in the description. And anybody who wants to help, then we very much welcome it. Thank you so much. But for anybody that doesn't think that's the route to go, okay, you're welcome to your opinion. I have no problem with that. But that's the way we're going to do it. And obviously, in the box below is also the link to the PayPal if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing.
And people did send donations for this cause. People donated via her YouTube channel as well as through her PayPal. Her personal PayPal was attached to the main social media groups, and in addition, a Buy Me a Coffee fund was set up, which on the surface was made to look as if it was to support her work, although she explained that the fund was set up this way as all major fundraisers refuse funds for convicted persons. People were happy to send money, believing that it was going to Luke's cause. There has never been any figure given for the amount raised under this premise, but none of it has been spent on the testing of samples. We'll come back to this later in the video. So did the police agree to release samples for testing? In one of her updates, she explained that a letter had laid out certain stipulations for the testing of the samples. For example, that it would need to be carried out in a Scottish Police Authority lab under police supervision. Sandraleen made it clear that this would not be an option that she or Luke's legal team would even consider, and explains why in one of her 2023 updates.
After a long conversation with Luke last night, he asked that I make this information public today. And I'll explain the reasons for that as we go along. But on the 11th, Wednesday, a letter was received with regard to these samples. So I'm just going to take you through that letter because I think it's very, very, very important information that people need to know. So here goes. The letter was dated the 31st of March. And the opening line is, "We refer to your correspondence dated 1st March 2023. So immediately, straight away, it took them 6 weeks. It took 6 weeks for us to get a response to that correspondence. And it goes on to say, "I can confirm that the undertaking provided by Copfus and Police Scotland on the 16th November 2022 that no productions that remained held would be disposed of. And this undertaking still stands." Well, that's a good start. They're not going to destroy any of what's left for now. "The medical and forensic type samples are currently held by Police Scotland within a production storage facility in Edinburgh." Good. Now we have an idea of where they are. And this is where it gets interesting. "The case is considered as resolved, and any existing productions are the responsibility of Police Scotland. The decision as to whether or not examination can take place rests with Police Scotland. Rats in charge of the cheese. Any analysis or examination of the medical and forensic type samples would require to take place under strict guidelines and in a controlled manner in order to preserve the integrity of the evidence." Do you know, if this wasn't so serious, that would be funny. These are the people who destroyed 90% of the evidence. And I said, sorry, that was a mistake. To preserve the integrity of the evidence. And the other bit here, they would require to take place under strict guidelines and in a controlled manner. What did they think we were going to do? Take them down to the local high school, give them to the kids in the science lab and say, "Go on, have at it, see what you can find." Of course not. We are talking top scientists, top laboratories, not just in the country, in the world. I will continue. "The analysis or examination would require the supervision of a police officer and a member of SPA staff, Scottish Police Authority staff, and be conducted within an SPA lab." What? How does a police officer supervise a forensic scientist? They are two entirely different things. At the very least, Police Scotland would have to bring in their own forensic scientist to supervise what our forensics experts would be looking at. Secondly, be conducted in an SPA lab. We're looking at the most up-to-date processes, the most up-to-date equipment, the best testing we can possibly get for these samples. So how would we know that an SPA lab of their choosing would have that equipment and those standards? The answer is we don't. We don't. So what happens if we turn up on the day, or our scientists turn up on the day, and that laboratory does not have the equipment or the standards required? Are we just supposed to go ahead and test down to their standards? That, to me, and certainly to Luke, that is completely unacceptable. Given what they've done up until now, I don't think they have the right anymore to be dictating the terms of how these things are handled going forward. We would request a specific list detailing the productions required for examination, and only those items would be issued for examination. An indication of the time required is also requested in order to determine police and SPA capacity to be present at any examination. Okay, once again, first of all, they would only consider specific items. Why? We are not asking them to pay for it. Likewise, the laboratories. We're not asking them to pay for it. What harm would it do them to release them for testing if we're willing to pay for the testing?
After these updates, the campaign to pressure the police to release the samples for independent testing continued. And in June of 2024, the two main social media groups who were at one point overseen by Sandrine finally made the big announcement. The request for the remaining samples has been made. Will they continue with this 20-year cover-up? Will you accept it if they refuse? And Luke's legal team have requested the remaining samples to be released for independent testing. A group admin even commented that they couldn't say how long it would take, but confirmed that the request had been made. In the same month, posts on the group urged campaigners to engage in a social media surge to pressure the police to release the samples. One of them said, "Luke's legal team have requested the samples to be released for independent testing. We are all waiting. What do we do if they refuse to release the samples? But the problem is, the samples were never requested." It has been 7 months since those announcements were made, and in that time a series of Freedom of Information requests have been made to both Police Scotland and SPA, the Scottish Police Authority, who were forensic services at the time of the murder in 2003. Police Scotland were asked, "Are you able to confirm whether a request has been submitted for the release and retesting of samples in the case of Jodi Jones by convicted individual Luke Mitchell's legal team?" They replied, "I interpret this question to refer to the time period after the conviction of Luke Mitchell. I can confirm that no request has been received in this case for the release of productions for the purpose of retesting by a forensic provider from legal representative acting on behalf of Luke Mitchell." That response was dated the 14th of November 2024, 5 months after the claim was made by the groups. A further question was asked to Police Scotland. "Are you able to confirm whether the release of any productions has been requested at all by Luke Mitchell's legal representation?" A response dated the 29th of November confirmed that there was no record of legal representatives requesting the release of specific productions. So it would appear that no productions have been requested at all, for the purpose of testing or otherwise. But what if the request had been made elsewhere? What if the productions had been moved and, say for example, the request had been made to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service instead? On January the 8th, 2025, Police Scotland confirmed that they do still hold the productions and that it would be to themselves that a request would need to be made. So no requests have been made. But there's a bit more to this story. Sandra claimed that some of the untested samples included semen.
Now, remarkably, among this evidence, apparently are 10 semen deposits which were taken from Jodi's body. So there was semen on Jodi's body and it was never tested.
Yeah.
That just seems unfathomable. Did you know that this existed before this all happened?
No. When we discovered that there were samples left, there was a file that was marked not on main inventory. Forensics not on main inventory. And when we got into this file, I was talking about productions earlier, and just so that people understand, when items are collected, they're given a unique reference number so that they can be followed through the entire investigation and through to trial and appeal if necessary. In this file, not one of the samples in there had a reference number. Not one. And we found samples in there that basically the defence knew nothing about.
Were they disclosed to the defence but marked in such a way that they seemed irrelevant, or were they simply not disclosed to the defence?
A large number of them were never disclosed at all, is what we're discovering now. And some of them, like you say, may have been disclosed, but in such a way that you would never recognise that they were significant at all.
And what about these 10 semen deposits on Jodi's body? Were they disclosed or undisclosed?
They weren't disclosed as semen deposits as such. They were in a list of no results, a great big list of no results stuff, and they were just in that list. So we didn't know what we got no results for. We just had no results. It just said tests brought no results. And then when we got into this hidden file, we realised that initially they've tested positive for semen and then never been tested any further, just been put into this other file and left there for 20 years. We don't know who they are. And then, of course, we discovered with the evidence destruction, we discovered a whole pile of samples that had been tested as far as, yes, they've tested positive for semen, and then they've gone no further. So they didn't bother to find out who it was. But we didn't know who it was until after the evidence destruction.
In order for a sample to be called semen, it has to be forensically tested. This isn't something that's allowed to be based on guesswork. In one of the responses, Police Scotland confirmed that it is not possible to have an untested semen sample. It has to have been examined before it can be labelled. But what about the claim that these semen samples were not tested for DNA? SPA responded to a Freedom of Information request to confirm that if semen was identified and sampled, it would also have been DNA tested. So there we have it. Supporters were not only completely misinformed about the samples being requested for testing, but the response from SPA opposes what Sandra told supporters about untested semen samples. According to SPA, they were all DNA tested. Some supporters have said that the police can't be trusted. We shouldn't believe anything they say about this case. Does that mean that others who are providing information to the public, those raising money with the claim of good intentions, should be trusted? I think it's evident that they cannot be. This does leave questions. What happened to the money that was raised? It wasn't returned to the individuals who donated it. Who told the people running the social media groups that the requests had been made for the samples? Did they knowingly misinform supporters? One of the groups has over 9,000 members. Or were they also misinformed? If so, by who? There's been nothing from those who made the announcement. No follow-ups, no more social media surges, no more protests. The groups who used to shout loud about justice for Jodi Jones and Luke Mitchell have fallen silent.